Hi everyone, Ryan Chapman here from Freelancer-Client. Thanks for tuning into this episode today. Today I'm going to talk about listing your job or your project on Upwork. Upwork, like Gurus or like Freelancer, is an online marketplace where you can hire freelancers from all around the world who are talented, experienced, and can get your project done, or you can outsource activities too. So the steps of listing a project or a job are quite easy, but I'll take you through the individual steps and get you up and running in no time.
Okay, so I'm logged into Upwork. If you don't have a login, then you need to get that sorted out before you do anything else. The same applies for Freelancer or Gurus. So you land on the jobs page and you click on Post Job. And what happens is you'll be then given two options that you can choose from. The first option being the part-time or short-term piece of work, and then there's the longer-term engagement. The real distinction between the two is the part-time or short-term piece of work is really for projects where you're not sure exactly what you want delivered. So it could be something like a virtual assistant who's coming in to help you for 10 or 15 hours a week with no fixed scope of delivery. They're just going to help you do things, get tasks done in your life, versus the longer-term engagement, which is around projects where you've scoped out exactly what you want delivered and you've got a commitment to having that delivered over a month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever it is. So that's the real distinction there. I'm going to go into the part-time option here. I'll take you through the longer-term engagement one as well. They're very similar, so there's not too much difference between the features, but I'll take you through the first one and then I'll show you the differences in the longer-term engagement one. So you land here, you have the option of using a previous job, which I won't. So there's previous jobs listed here. I can then choose a category. Now, I'm going to choose, for today's example, I'm going to choose web research. And there you go, admin support web research. Now, what I'm going to pretend to do today is I'm going to create a project for listing out a startup that I have. It's all fictional. That's manufacturing healthcare products for the Chinese consumer market. So I want to hire someone who's going to come along and do some competitive research for me on the Chinese healthcare market. So I've chosen the web research option. Now the category becomes really important, which I'll show you later. But firstly, it's important from the freelancer's perspective as well, because what it does is when freelancers sign up to any platform, they categorize their skills. And so they might categorize themselves as being a web research expert. And what that means is apart from helping you understand what their skill sets are and the category they fall into, it also means that any jobs that get listed for web research are alerted to that freelancer. So you describe the job. Now, these two fields, I would say, out of all the fields on Post a Job, are probably your most critical fields. So, for example, if I just write web research, what will happen is freelancers will scan the jobs and they'll find a job for web research. The good freelancers will just ignore it because the good freelancers have a lot of work available to them. The good freelancers will choose specific jobs or projects that tick the boxes in terms of their skill set and are of interest to them. If they see a job like this with web research, they'll do one of two things. They'll just go ignore it, move on to the next job to see if that's of interest, or they'll look at the description below. But if you don't get the title right, if you don't get the name right, you actually lose a number of freelancers along the way. It also makes it very clear to freelancers exactly what you're trying to achieve within just one line of the job posting. So I'm going to change this to web research for competitive analysis in the Okay, so coming from what I wrote, which originally was web research, which really didn't mean a lot to anyone, including me, to web research for competitive analysis in the Chinese healthcare industry, that means that a freelancer looking at this is going to do a couple of things. They're going to go, firstly, I know what I want. Secondly, they're going to try and pitch their skills to align to any work they've done around competitive analysis. And thirdly, they'll also look to bring in any experience they've had in the Chinese healthcare industry, which is going to be beneficial for me because what it means is the quality of the proposals I get and the quality of the freelancers that are going to submit will be close to exactly what I'm trying to achieve. The second most important field here is the description of what needs to be done. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time in this TV episode explaining what this field provides and giving you some examples and so on, because that's a separate piece of work I'll do on a blog I'm about to release. But what I will say is, as I mentioned, this is the second most important field, and you need to provide specifics of your project or your job in here. If you don't provide the specifics such as the scope of what needs to be done, the time frames, specific reference points that you've got, any questions you might have, if you don't provide all that information, you're going to get poor quality responses from freelancers. So it's important you provide really specific, detailed information here. Now, this is going to give me anxiety by doing this, but I'm just going to leave something very short here. I want you to provide me with. So as I mentioned, this totally goes against the grain for me around providing the right level of detail, but I'll just leave that as a placeholder. You come to the attached file section. Now, you have the option, if you want, as part of the job, to submit your documentation associated with this job or this project. Now, what I tend to do is I don't put my files up here at this stage. What can happen is that if you put too much information up here, my personal view is that sharing too much information up here too early can just expose your project and job to people that might take that information and use it for other purposes. So they might go and decide to take that information, potentially go and use it in another job they've got, for example, another client, or a freelancer might take that information and go, great idea, I'm going to use it and create my own job, or sorry, my own project with it. Now, that might sound a little bit paranoid, but I just have an aversion to providing too much information at this point. So you can provide requirements, you can provide things like the tools, for example, I want to use as part of this project. I could provide reference points for this freelancer to look at in terms of the specific competitors that I'm looking to analyze, etc. You can provide that information, and that's fine. I would just steer clear of that personally at the moment and wait till I've shortlisted my freelancers and then start to share that information at that point in time. The next thing I provide here is the type of project. So you've got three options. I'm not sure, which is a great fallback or insurance policy if you're not sure. You can provide a one-time project or an ongoing project. Now, the distinction between a one-time project and an ongoing project is as follows. One-time project means pretty much you've got a fixed piece of work that needs to be done within the time frame, and then once that's done, your contract with this freelancer is over. Alternatively, you might have an ongoing project where you've got the need, for example, for a virtual assistant that will work with you gradually or incrementally over time for the next, say, 3 to 6 months. So you might run this project for 1 month, test out that freelancer, see what the virtual assistant is like. If they're any good, then you create a longer term contract with them to keep them on board for another 5 months, for example. How many freelancers you want to hire for this job? So this provides you with the option of specifying one freelancer or multiple freelancers. I generally go with one freelancer, but it's very specific to the types of projects that you're doing. So for example, if I'm doing a web development web development site, or if I'm doing a mobile app, or if I'm doing something like an ebook, for example, I will hire one freelancer. Now, how they structure that project as to whether they hire, or whether they have freelancers working with them, or whether they've got their own virtual team, it's really up to them. I don't care at the end of the day, so long as my project gets delivered and it gets delivered on time. Where you would potentially use one or more freelancers is in scenarios where you are time constrained, and secondly, you have a piece of work that can be standardized and replicated consistently by multiple freelancers to the same level of quality, then this would work for you. So I'll give you an example. If I needed to get some pages on the internet scraped for data, so some data scraping done, and I can't find a tool that automates that, I could look to hire a freelancer to do that, and they could go through and take the information I need and put it into a database or a spreadsheet. Now, it would be much more efficient if multiple freelancers could do this work in parallel. And the reason why is it would mean that the amount of work required is still the same, but it could get done in a shorter period of time. So I could compress the amount of work, I could compress the time frame it takes to get the amount of work that I need done completed. So as I mentioned, this is really useful for scenarios where you've got a very similar piece of work that can be replicated easily to the same level of quality by multiple freelancers in parallel. It doesn't work though if you're running like a website development project, because effectively having one freelancer working on the coding of it in parallel to another freelancer, it's not going to work because they'll have different styles, different approaches to how they do things. It's not going to work. We get to the next one, which is skills. Now, what you can see here already is it's prompting me, Upwork is prompting me with skills that it thinks will be relevant for me. Now, that is based on this category here. So this category forms really two important channels of of context. As I mentioned earlier, it informs the freelancer as to the type of project I'm looking to launch. It also allocates the job and the project to the right queue in terms of the freelancers that are actually experienced doing those types of projects. And then secondly, it prompts me in terms of the skill sets that are relevant for this project. So I'll choose internet research. I'll choose some other skills like data mining, which will be relevant for this, and maybe some Google search. I won't spend too much time on that, but that gives you a sense of the types of skills you would use. The next thing is you can choose the rate and availability. Now you've got two options here. You've got pay by the hour or fixed price. When you choose pay by the hour, it changes the options you have available. And similarly here, fixed price changes the options here. Now this is similar across most of the freelancer platforms. If I choose pay by the hour, it will prompt me to select a relevant desired experience level. So you've got entry level, intermediate, and expert. Now I won't spend too much time on this because I cover this off in my blog, but in short, I generally go with intermediate because entry level tends to be freelancers that aren't necessarily as qualified and as experienced as I'd like them to be. And that's great for a very simple project or job where they've just got to do something very simple, repeatable, like data entry. It can work wonders and it's cheap. Intermediate, you get the best of both worlds. You actually get really good value resources or freelancers, and you also get skills. Expert, you tend to pay a lot more, but what you are getting with expert are premium freelancers who will do the job up to a very high standard of quality and probably do it quite quickly as well because they know how to get the job done. I'm going to choose intermediate for this project. If I decided to do a fixed price project for this, which is naturally what I tend to sort of focus on, but I do pay by the hour projects when the need arises, such as virtual assistants, all I would need to do is choose the budget for it. Now the budget is something that is an entire subject and an entire podcast in its own right. But what I will say about budget is do not disclose your full budget, because what will happen is if you have a freelancer that, for example, is estimating this will take them $500, but you've put your budget as $1,000, what's going to happen? The freelancer will choose the $1,000 option and actually price the project at $1,000 because what it means to them is they get an extra $500 worth of money or cash effectively for not much extra work. So effectively it's going to cost them $500 to do the project, and that's inclusive of a profit margin for them. And then they get another $500 on top of that, which is just extra money in the bank, I guess. So never disclose your full budget. Go with a conservative position. You might have a view that the project is a $500 project, for example. Put your budget at $100. And what you would then do is in your description above here, and you'll describe the work to be done, you would make it very clear that the budget you've allocated is indicative only, and you want freelancers to come back to you with an accurate cost. Okay, I've spoken about desired experience level, so I won't go into that. Then you get the freelancer preferences. Now, all this is standard across both the short-term hiring option, which we're in at the moment, and also the fixed term or the longer engagement option I'll talk about in a moment. But all this is standard. So you have three options. You can either use freelancers on Upwork, or if you're going to Freelancer, for example, you could use the freelancers on that site. And you can also have this posted to search engines such as Google. So there's an API that Google, I think, feeds off of, and it will suck this information out of Upwork and display it in search results. It would only display it if you're searching on keywords involving this. The benefit of doing that is effectively you open up the net for freelancers that might apply for this job outside of Upwork as well. So you get a wider selection of freelancers. But I will say that with the majority of the larger scale freelancer marketplaces such as Upwork, you will get more than enough jobs and proposals provided by freelancers. So I don't really use this option. I don't use this option not only for that, but also because I don't want necessarily too much publicity for my projects, because what tends to happen is that's when you start to get the spam. So people who do SEO marketing or do email marketing or do weird and wonderful things that you're not wanting or not in need of at the moment, you'll start to get spam emails from them because they'll suck out your information, they'll figure out who you are, and they'll just send you random information, random emails, and it just sucks up your time. I don't need it, so don't do it. What I tend to go with is the one of these two options below. So I either go with only Upwork users or I go with only freelancers I've invited previously. The benefit of using freelancers I've invited previously is twofold. Firstly, it means I can get access to freelancers I trust, I've worked with them, I know what their experience is, and they'll get the job done for me reliably. The other benefit of this as well is that it takes the amount of time required to get proposals down. So it compresses the amount of time that's required for me to get proposals in, because effectively they know who I am. They don't need to provide all the blurb around their portfolio, their feedback, etc. They can just tell me and be honest and upfront about it with me, about how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take. So that saves all the time around getting proposals. Literally, you can probably get proposals in within a day based on this third option. The second option opens up a wider audience within Upwork to your job or your proposal. It has a couple of benefits. Firstly, it means that obviously existing freelancers can apply, because if you look down here, you can still actually invite existing freelancers you've worked with to apply to. So that's a great thing. The second thing is it opens up the net. So there might be freelancers out there that could potentially be more suitable to doing this project than your existing freelancers. So I'll give you an example. I might have some freelancers that are really great at doing research for me, but they've not got any experience in doing research related to competitive analysis and competitive analysis in the Chinese healthcare industry. So by opening up to this third option here, it means I potentially can find freelancers that are even more specific to my needs. You get into options around preferred qualifications. Now this is good, although I will caveat this by saying I actually generally put the qualifications up in the description because it gives me more breathing space to explain exactly what I'm after and the measures and the criteria I'm expecting the freelancer to meet. So one of the options I have down here around preferred qualifications is job success score. Now this is a really important one because what you need to be clear about with your freelancers is that you are expecting them to have a track record of history on Upwork or Freelancer or Gurus or People by the Hour, whatever it is. You want them to have a track record of history that's substantial and demonstrates that they've done some really great work. So I have a threshold which is 94%, which I talk about in my TV episode number 1 on shortlisting. That 94% has worked for me time and time again. It's a random number I came up with, but I just find that if I hire freelancers that have, or shortlist freelancers that have a success score of greater than 94% or equal to 94%, the projects tend to go much better. Just works for me. So you have the options of putting these qualifications into your job or your project. This is probably relevant. I tend to go with agencies, and I speak about that in my Freelancer-Client TV episode number 1 around shortlisting. I also go with job success score, but as I mentioned, I put that into the description. Rising talent I really don't care about. Hours billed, I use that more as a shortlisting mechanism later on, so I don't really care too much about the hours billed. I looked at that later on. Location, irrelevant for me. I don't care where my freelancers are so long as they do a great job and within the timeframes agreed. English is probably relevant because I only speak very basic Italian and very basic Japanese, so I'm not going to find too many freelancers with those capabilities, and I would prefer to speak English because it helps me explain my feedback and my concepts of what I want to achieve a lot easier. So I might choose English as fluent. Group, I really don't spend a lot of time on, although I will say there's a lot of merit in hiring veterans. I used to serve in the Army Reserve for a short period, and I believe that investing in people that have served your country is a good thing. Last of all, or second last of all, you get to screening questions. Now, I do use this. I use this for 2 reasons. Firstly, it helps me filter out freelancers. So I'll put screening questions in like this one. What experience have you had completing competitive analysis? Sorry, my typing is terrible. So I put a question just then, as you can see, around the experience that the freelancers had around doing competitive analysis for the Chinese healthcare industry. And I've also asked them to share some reports. This will help me filter out some freelancers by making it very clear that I expect my freelancers to have some experience of doing competitive analysis. And if they've done it for Chinese healthcare market participants, that's a bonus. But what I really want to see is some of the reports they've done to get a sense of the way they do the reports, the tone, the scope of information, the granularity, etc. So you can add a number of questions here around specifics that you want your freelancers to respond to you on. You can put it up in the description here as well. So there's either or is fine. This probably just calls it out separately for the freelancers as well, and they have to respond to these individually. My second point around this as well is what it does is it gives you credibility. So what happens is with some freelancers who aren't experienced, or they're a little bit less scrupulous compared to the more genuine, honest, hardworking freelancers on Upwork and Freelancer and People by the Hour, etc., is that if they don't get a sense of, your topic, how to do freelance projects, if they don't get that sense, they'll take you for a ride. And so this gives a very strong indication to anyone applying for this project or this job that you know about your domain, you know about this topic, and you also know how the freelance hire process works, freelancer hire process works. Last of all, cover letters. This is another important feature of your job or project. I always ask for cover letters. A lot of the time they're meaningless. So from experience, and you might have experienced this as well, you get these templates that freelancers have just sort of copied and pasted and sent to you. But regardless, it's a good sign that at least a freelancer is taking the effort to send something through to you. If they've then taken that extra effort of putting specific information relating to their proposal, so the breakdown of the milestones, for example, some idea of what it may cost. They can't lock themselves in at this stage without seeing my detailed requirements, of course. Some of their skills and why they think they're relevant for this project, and some of the previous work they've done. If they've taken the time to do that, for me, that's a really good indication that they're motivated for this project and they care about it. Now, care is the key word here. They care about this project, because what you don't want to do is hire a freelancer that just doesn't care about this project. They just treat it as a cash cow. They make a bit of extra money and they just give you a poor outcome. You want a freelancer that's going to care. And so by getting them to send you a cover letter indicates how much they care. Secondly, as I mentioned with the letter itself, the freelancer will put specific information in if they're proactive. That type of information can give you a bit more background on the freelancer, why they're suitable for this project, and as I mentioned, some of the previous experience they've had and the portfolio of work they've done that they might provide some links to, or they'll give you some specific soft copies of, in this instance, market intelligence or market research they've done. So that's pretty much this side of it. If I press post job, then this job is actually submitted and off we go. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back up here and I will go back. And I'll just quickly show you this other side of it, which is the longer term engagement piece. As I mentioned, very similar to the short term piece of work. There's only probably one difference in all this. So exactly the same fields. I'm going to start a new post here. The only difference I've found, generally speaking, is the start date. There are no other fields here that you'll find different. The start date, which I'll come back to down here, is pretty important. Now, it's important for two reasons. It gives a freelancer an indication of when you are wanting to start the project, obviously. That's the first thing. The second thing is it gives a signal to freelancers as to how committed and how serious you are about this project. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is, for example, today is the 3rd of January. If I listed this project as being a project I wanted to start or commence on the 6th of January, I want to start on the 6th of January. What that indicates to freelancers is two things. Firstly, they need to get their proposals in really quickly, because my threshold for looking at proposals and making a decision is low, and I have a very short amount of time left. So they need to come in and get their proposals to me very quickly. Secondly, what it indicates as well is that I'm serious about this project. So what I mean by that is that if I'm looking to start this project this week, it means I've got things like my requirements sorted out. I know what I'm after. It means I've got a very clear view on who I want to hire and when I want to hire them by. And thirdly, it means I've got my funding and budget sorted out. So I've got the money to spend on this project. If, in contrast, I set the date for starting this project to, say, 4 weeks out, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, or even later, what that indicates to a freelancer is I'm not sure about whether I'm going ahead with this project or not, and I really don't know what I'm after, and I don't have my requirements sorted out. Now, for some freelancers, that's not a problem, but you'll find that the freelancers that's not a problem for are generally the freelancers that will take up any job. They're not the right freelancers for you. You want to hire someone that's going to be a premium or a premier or a sort of mid-tier freelancer that's going to get a great outcome for you and can read the signs that you are committed and interested and serious about doing this job. So that's the only difference there. So that's how you submit a job or a project up on Upwork.
So I hope you found that helpful. Make sure to check out Freelancer-Client TV episode number 1 on shortlisting. Shortlisting is a process that you undertake once you've listed your job or your proposal, and it helps you work out a smaller subset of freelancers that you then want to move forward with in terms of discussing their proposals and considering for final selection for your project or your outsourcing activity. So make sure to check it out. Again, thanks for tuning in.